Hello. Hi, Spoorthy. How are you?
Hey Laura, doing good, thank you. How are you?
I am good. So today is the 2nd of July, and here in Germany, it is almost noon. And I am Laura Maria Caldarone, and this is 14 Days to Change. And with us, we have Spoorthy Raman, and she is the managing editor of Research Matters, a science news portal dedicated to cover news relevant to India. I am so happy that you're here. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So you are our 5th story in this new series, but this is not the first time we speak. This is actually our 2nd interview because our first one was the 18th of June. So now we are going to see how things have changed in India. Before we speak about the situation in India, there are 2 things I want to do. The first one is just give a reminder of how the numbers were when we first spoke and how they are today. So the numbers, the total cases that India had back on the 18th of June was 366,945 cases. And back then, India had a little bit over 12,200 deaths. Today, instead, we have 604,641 total cases. That's a big jump. And deaths, unfortunately, we have 17,834. So that's the first thing I wanted to do, just give a reminder of the numbers back 2 weeks ago, the numbers today. These are the official numbers that we have. And the second thing is, how about we have a look at some of the things we discussed 2 weeks ago, get to know you a little bit. So I'm going to play bits of our video, of what I recorded, of our interview of 2 weeks ago. So I will ask you to please go on mute. And I am going to share the screen. And just to make sure that nothing goes wrong, just let me know if you see everything well. So here we go. I am sharing. You should be seeing. Hello. Hi. So today is the 18th of June, 2020. We are here in Germany. On my side, it's almost noon. And with us today, we have Spoorthy. And she is going to be telling us about her story in Bangalore, India. Please start off and just tell me your name complete and just tell me about yourself.
Hey, hi Laura, thanks for having me on this and giving me an opportunity to share what we are undergoing in India. So I hope everybody who is listening to us is doing well, and I wish them well too. So I'm Spoorthy Raman. I am a science writer and reporter from Bangalore, India, as you mentioned. I spent most of parts of my life in Bangalore, so this is a city I've been in for almost about 25, 30 years now. So yeah, so that's my Bangalore connection. And I work as a managing editor for a science news portal called Research Matters, which we started about 3.5 years ago. And prior to that, I was one of those techies in Bangalore, being a software engineer.
Which is so
and switched gears just yeah, of course. So I thought science was more, more attractive in that sense. So I just switched gears and started writing.
Perspective. You can speak about India, but obviously also tell us a little bit more specifically about Bangalore, because I know for such a big country as India, we shouldn't generalize it as a country. Obviously it is a country, but every area is quite different in general, and specifically how they are acting and reacting to the pandemic and what their situation is. So start telling me just what is the most important thing that is happening right now in Bangalore and in India from a topic news perspective. Like, what is it that you are talking about? What is it that everybody is focused on?
Okay, so as you know, India went into lockdown because of the pandemic way early in March. That was a time when we had like little 3 digits cases, but the entire country was locked down with the hope that this can arrest the spread. So we were under lockdown for about 2.5 months. And it's only in June that things have started slowly opening up. But unfortunately, the cases have risen so much. Now we are almost touching 1 million cases. Deaths have risen up. We are into 5-figure deaths right now, unfortunately. So right now, people across the country are kind of questioning, okay, what did the lockdown do? So right now we are kind of reflecting on what happened in the 2.5 months that we were locked up at homes. And what did not happen, that's more important. Like, did we not prep our primary healthcare services? Did we not prep people in terms of how to be prepared? And did we even educate them as to how this whole thing really works? So, there were individual efforts to do so, but I think the message also is when it comes to people's survival, versus getting caught with an infection, I think people have really different choices to make, or rather difficult choices to make. So in India, what the pandemic also brought in was the biggest exodus since the partition in 1947, where a lot, when I say a lot, millions of migrants had to move from cities to their villages in different parts of India. So that's a very unfortunate humanitarian crisis we witnessed in the recent past. So that is something that the country is talking about right now. Well, many people have fortunately made home, and unfortunately lives have been lost in this whole movement because the trains, the buses, and any kind of public transportation was shut. People literally walked hundreds and thousands of kilometers to their houses. Well, they didn't have a place to go. I mean, where else would you go if you're not going back to your house, when you are shunted out of your jobs, shunted out of the cities that you built in the first place? So that is something that the country is reflecting on right now, big time, because that's a scale of migration we've never seen before. We were not prepared to handle. And the lockdown was kind of draconian, if I may say so, because everything was shut down with a notice of like 2 hours. That's not something that you expect a country like as big as India to kind of go through. So again, has given us a lot of thinking in terms of what did we do wrong, because the cases were not arrested at the end of all these efforts. So the other thing that's making news in the past 2 days is the unwanted escalation of tensions in the borders between India and China. So that's also something that we are worrying besides the pandemic, I would say, because for any country, this is not the time to go to war. Any time is not the time to go to war, but this is definitely not the time to go to war. So that is also something that we are speaking about. And in Bangalore, majorly, since we don't luckily live next to, international borders, the major worry has been, what if the virus really comes to my doorstep? What do I do? How do I prevent it? Or rather, what choice do I have? The healthcare system has already started buckling in other cities. Bangalore, not so much. But when you read stories of denial of, when you read stories of people actually dying on the corridors of hospitals, you get your spines really shivering, because it is them today, it could be anybody tomorrow. I mean, it could be us tomorrow. So that's actually having a lot of effect on how people are thinking through this, and hoping against hope that hopefully everything is going to be okay in the days to come. But I should mention that Bangalore is not as affected as other metros right now.
Okay, that's what
the other metros. Yeah, so the other metros compared to Bangalore, like the city of Delhi or Mumbai, which is a major hub, economic hub, or even Kolkata, which is a city on the towards the eastern side of the country. The cases, if you actually look at those cities, Bangalore hasn't been so bad so far, fortunately. But there is no guarantee that it wouldn't. So that's where we are hoping against hope that things are not going to go down go down that road.
Hopefully, because like as we were talking earlier, anything can change at any time. So from good to bad or bad to good, and that's the scary and good thing, I guess, in this pandemic. So hopefully Bangalore stays in that, Bangalore's and India's. What are your hopes? What are your concerns? What is it that you think that is going to happen to Bangalore and India in the next few days, in the next few weeks, that you want to happen or you don't want to happen? Just give me a look into your thoughts.
Okay. Basically two things, in the sense of there are some things that unfortunately I think will happen, and there are some things I wish would not happen. So here are things that I think will happen. If you look at what we have been doing in terms of testing, the number of cases that we are doing every day, although there has been an increase since the initial days of procuring the test kits and a lot of investment in that kind of infrastructure to be able to test somebody to say whether that person is really positive or negative for this infection, we have a long way to go. The number of testing we have been doing is far, far less than what we should have been doing, because ours is a very densely populated country. It's very possible for somebody to have an infection picked up randomly when you're out on the street. So as long as we up and prep our testing compared to what we are doing it today, we will never be able to know who that person is. We will never be able to contact trace. And if we cannot contact trace, then we should acknowledge that this is going to go and blow out of proportion, which is unfortunately already happening in some clusters. But this is going to be a mega disaster if we can't do that. So looking at the lack of seriousness on that end, I would say we will be facing severe challenges in terms of our healthcare infrastructure catching up to this. We are hearing stories where people are being denied hospital beds. We are hearing stories where private as well as public healthcare facilities in India, which private care here is a big part of healthcare. So they are shutting their doors to people who have any signs of COVID-19 infections. Pregnant women have been denied hospital beds and unfortunately have succumbed to this. There has been a case in Delhi, which is the capital city, where a pregnant woman, 8 months into her pregnancy, was shown doors in 8 hospitals, and eventually she could not make it. She could not live up to a day to see the baby. It really is so unfortunate and so disheartening. But realistically, these are the cases we will be increasingly hearing because of the way we are ramping ourselves to it. And the other thing is, of course, the lack of civility, so to say, among people, because there are still quote unquote COVIDiots who do not wear a mask, who do not maintain physical distancing. And this includes people in power. This includes our own ministers who attend public events without a mask, who attend public events and get themselves clicked with 100 of supporters around them. And this is some kind of, a joke that's being played on the public, so to say, because you as a minister need to set an example. You need to show people how to live. If you are flouting all the rules that you yourself made, I'm talking about a health minister of a state, going into a religious ceremony without a mask, not practicing social, physical distancing, and then you what? How do you show your face to people and ask them? True, yeah. So that's very unfortunate. And considering all this, that also tells me that we are going to brace for difficult days. It's only tip of the iceberg that we are touching. And things are going to, go downwards from here. So these are realistic, hopes, or rather realistic, expectations from my side for the country. Unfortunately, so cynical it may sound. But I am hopeful. I am hopeful in the fact that we still have a lot of time to gear up ourselves if we invested in the right things and did the right things. We still have time to buy ourselves, some kind of immunity, so to say. I'm not talking about the medical immunity, but so to say, immunity.
I think there is a little problem.
Washing hands.
Oh, sorry, you cut off a little bit. I didn't hear what you said. You were saying the immunity, so not...
Yeah. So not the medical immunity, I mean. I'm talking about immunity against getting worse in terms of where we stand in the pandemic. So if you still, practice the much, advertised guidelines of wearing a mask, practicing physical distancing, not getting, not hanging out with friends just because you haven't met them for like 3 months. That isn't what you need right now. You need to be more responsible from the citizenry, as we say. And if we still did that, we may have a better chance to kind of ward off all the cumulative effects of this pandemic. There could still be infections, but at least we buy time for ourselves. That's my hope. I really wish people really take that up to them to really practice these things, not only for the sake of themselves, but also for the sake of the society at large.
And yeah, it's the hope of many of us that understand and see the severity of this pandemic, that we hope that, but we also know that it can change. And that's what we try to do in informing, right? And staying with this topic, the last topic of our interview, just with what can change or what can happen. Tell me one thing, if you could give a message to yourself in the future, so Spoorthy in 14 days, what would you tell her? What's the message that you would give her?
I would say remain hopeful, trust that people will follow or at least listen to what science has to say, and not be foolish enough to buy anything and everything that has been thrown at them. I wish, or rather I would tell that the Spoorthy from 14 years will have more, 14 days, will have more to, really appreciate of what our public is capable of in terms of absorbing fact-based news. I would also wish to see our cases, if not going down, but not exponentially raising, flattening the curve. But 14 days is too early. My inner self tells me that, but then I'm hoping against hope. At least we get to a point where we are able to nicely see a curve that's flattening, and we are also having our health care kind of really set up to really take it up when it really comes to treating people who need care. So that's a big wish list, I would say, but that's what I would want to hear in like 14 days, nothing more. But realistically, again, it's really telling me hard that from where we start today, 14 days, it's going to be worse. The numbers are going to only increase, but yeah, I'm hoping against hope. Let's see.
Hoping against hope. Well, the topic is a very difficult and interesting topic, but I must say, Spoorthy, it has been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for your time. And now, as you know, we will see you in 14 days, and we will continue our interview then. So thank you very much, and see you in 14 days.
Thank you so much, Dara. It was nice speaking to you and sharing the story, because that's what most of us would want to do, right? Because we're looking at some channel to really share experiences, and this has been one, and I'm really grateful that you had given me this opportunity. And yeah, see you back in 14 days with Hoping Against Hope.
Exactly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So this is the first time you see this. 2 weeks ago, we had the interview, we recorded, and I never shared it with you because it's part of the storytelling experience. How do you feel?
Well, great job, I would say, in terms of showing it to me now, because that brought in a lot of memories of what I was thinking then. And yeah, I mean, I'm also unfortunately proud that I predicted it right, that things would not go well, and it didn't. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of depressing also because uh, there is we had so much time, we had so much of things that we could have possibly taken control of and brought about a nice flattening of the curve, but we didn't. And yeah, I mean, nothing's really changed from the past 15 days except for the fact that it's gone tumbling downhill. So yeah,
So
it doesn't definitely make me feel good to say
no,
it in a word.
no, I mean, we were hoping against hope, right? But that's the thing. We each need to make the change, to be part of the change. And if we don't change, if we don't do anything, then of course it won't change. Why would it, right? Before we really speak about some of the things that we discussed, just to see how it has changed, just a couple of things. The first one is, as we saw in the interview, when we were discussing about the number of cases that India had, we mentioned 1 million cases, but the reality is no. Thankfully, 2 weeks ago, it wasn't almost 1 million cases. It's not yet even 1 million cases. But the reason that you said 1 million cases is because around the 18th of June, one of the biggest news around the world was that Brazil was about to hit the 1 million mark. Unfortunately, they did. And actually right now they are about to hit the 1.5 million. So only 2 weeks, and look at also Brazil's situation. And from a global perspective, we've actually surpassed the 10 million milestone and 500,000 deaths milestone. So that's really where we are, right? And
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's a bit of a COVID fatigue, I should say, that I miss my numbers, because once in my profession, you keep track of numbers anyway, and it's so easy to kind of jumble it all up and blurt out something. So yeah, and thanks for correcting me on that.
yeah, too many, and unfortunately a lot of the numbers are becoming similar, right? Back then it was the United States, the one that was in the millions. Now we have also Brazil. Yeah, it's increasing. And actually yesterday, the day before yesterday, the World Health Organization also mentioned that although yes, there are some countries that are managing it well, that are able to work against the pandemic, from a global sense, in general, the pandemic is actually accelerating. The numbers are just growing, everything is just accelerating, and the truth, it's not even being pessimistic. You have to be realistic. You can hope and dream, but only until a certain point, because otherwise it becomes dangerous, right? So the reality right now is that this is just the beginning. We are just
Yeah,
at the beginning of the pandemic, and that is why we need to do certain measures. Back on the 18th of June, you mentioned, that there's still people that are not wearing masks, even high up in, in the leaders, the ones that should lead by example. What's the situation right now?
it's not changed, unfortunately. You still find people on the streets not wearing the mask. I have no idea what rationale they have in their brains, because people can no more claim ignore, I mean, no knowledge of it, because everybody is saying that wear a mask, that's something you need. And from a public information standpoint, the government has actually, it sends you text messages, it shows you on every channel, wear a mask, and kind of have that message internalized among people, but still there are people who just wear it here, opening their nose. The people who cover their chin, I don't know for what joy, and there are people who use the mask as more of a fashion accessory instead of actually wearing one. So it's hard to fathom what these people are really thinking in their brains and whether they have any at all, because if you are really, at least able to understand what is happening in terms of the rising cases and in terms of the precarious situation we are in, there is no reason why I think people shouldn't really wear a mask. But yeah, you still have people like this. You still have people organizing big fat weddings where
which we have been seeing
people are
in
exactly.
all international media outlets. One of the biggest topics, very sad, is this wedding. If you can tell us a little bit more, not only about the wedding itself and what happened, but also what are people in India saying about the wedding and the consequences of the wedding?
Yeah, so this wedding is not the only super spreading event that has happened in the past few days. So there have been so many cases where people have just gone out, partied with friends, have ended up infecting a lot of people than they would if they just sat at home rather. So the wedding kind of, I think, stands out because it has happened at a time when the country is opening up. So we were warned, well, I wouldn't say warned in terms of the experts who sit and make policies, but then there were skeptics around who actually pointed out, saying that this is probably not the time we should relax our lockdowns, because the cases anyway were just rising, and we still went ahead, did a unlock 1.0, and in the last, I think on Saturday, we did a unlock 2.0, which basically opened up quite a lot of things for people to just move around. Although our borders are closed, we don't have international flights coming in, but we do have repatriation flights still operating. We do have people moving, so to say. And then of course trains are running, buses are running, the public transport is not up to the full scale, but at least there's partial reopening of it. And then the advertisements right now are more of the government sponsored advertisements are telling people to just wear a mask, maintain physical distancing, and you're good to go for work. Well, maybe yes, but so long that kind of situation is able to sustain even in a work environment. Imagine a farm laborer wearing a mask and doing hard physical labor. That's not really practical, because the sweat, the moisture around, the nauseating feeling of just being inside a mask for so long hours is not something that people are used to. And the obvious reaction is that you just throw the mask away and then just get on to your work. But that's going to obviously have bad consequences, so to say. So when the messaging from the government changes like this at a critical state that we are in right now, I don't know, because I think that will still confuse people, and people are still going to be like, okay, it doesn't happen to me or whatever. So they will still go ahead and attend weddings like this. And unfortunately in India right now, we are also seeing a lot of deaths among young people. So in the wedding thing that happened in Bihar, the groom unfortunately succumbed to the disease. So there have been cases where people who are in this 24 to 40 age group also kind of easily falling prey to the disease and not making it alive. So it's it's really heartening to see all this, because even in spite of all these media reports, in spite of all these examples of where things can go wrong, you still have people going on about their usual stuff. You still have people in the government attending big occasions where they are with their party cadres celebrating about something, or just opening up some random thing like a flyover or anything. So things have not really improved, so to say. Yeah, but only that it's gone worse.
Worst. And I mean, just to take the example of this wedding, and like you said, it's not the only super spreading event, so I am not targeting it. The only reason I'm speaking about it is because it has really been everywhere in the news. also because it's very sad, right? It's a wedding. It's a moment of love, of union, and unfortunately, it doesn't even get to start. What we have seen is that the groom had symptoms before the wedding, and the wedding went ahead. So that also, we have to also think about that. Not only the fact that events, such big events, should not be taking place in the middle of a pandemic. It's just not something that should be done, for the simple fact that, first of all, more and more studies are showing that there are a lot of asymptomatic people that have no symptoms whatsoever, and they are actually infected and infecting. Number one. Number two, the wearing of a mask, that is if you think you are fine or if you are fine. But if you're sick, if you have any of the many symptoms, because there are actually many, the loss of taste, the loss of smell, nausea, diarrhea, and so on, you should not be leaving your house. You should stay at home or be in the hospital if it gets so bad that you need to be in the hospital. So the wearing of a mask is actually for people that are asymptomatic and they don't know it, or people that are fine, in order to protect others. And like you said, wearing a mask needs to be done correctly, hygienically. So not around your neck, not as sunglasses, not hanging around, but it needs to cover your mouth and your nose, right? Just like I use a silly example, but it's quite perfect. We chat all the time through Twitter, through Messenger, and what do we have there? We have a perfect example of how it should be done. The mask wearing emoji. You don't see its nose, you don't see its mouth. You need to do that. Cover both, right? And understand that it's not the solution. It's part of the solution. Social distancing, you still have to do it. You still have to wash your hands. You still have to understand that party. No, I shouldn't go to it. If I'm able to stay home, let me stay home. How is your healthcare system right now? Because when we spoke 2 weeks ago, there were already signs of it not doing very well. The numbers
So
have
I'll speak of,
tell me about it.
I'll speak of Bangalore because that's something I read in the newspaper just today morning. So there have been 3 people who have succumbed to COVID-19 because they couldn't get into a hospital. So again, multiple reports after reports are coming in right now in Bangalore, where the situation, which was doing okay when we last spoke, has now really gone to the dogs. So, I mean, I shouldn't really be saying this, but then it's really gone worse. The number of cases and the doubling rate of it has really decreased, which means to say that we are seeing more and more cases. So what used to be like in 2 digits are right now in the thousands. Each day we are seeing about 1,000 new cases in the state of Karnataka, and Bangalore sees a major share of it, say about 80% sometimes on some days. So we are seeing close to 900,000 cases in Bangalore alone per day. That's the kind of increase we are having in the last 15 days. So, which obviously says that the pressure on hospitals are also huge. There are only few hospitals that the government had reserved to treat people with COVID symptoms and COVID. And now they have expanded it to some private hospitals too, because initially it was just the government owned hospitals. But although they have expanded it to the private hospitals, there is no way, or rather there is no hold on these private hospitals to really admit people with symptoms. So what's happening again is like the case I mentioned 15 days ago in Delhi, where a woman was not allowed to kind of get into any hospital and she died on the way. Many such cases are being reported every single day. People die on the way to the hospital in ambulances. People die at the gate of a hospital because they are not let in, and the healthcare system definitely is under severe pressure, so to say, right now. And well, the doctors are not to be blamed because they are really working 18 hours a day, 16 hours a day, just putting in their best efforts. But I think this is a failure of the government as such, or the governance as such, because we haven't really had a nice ramp up of, like, like in Wuhan, when things got a little out of control for the existing healthcare to kind of take care, they really built a mobile hospital. In like 10 days, they had a hospital which really catered to the, incoming patients. We don't have an infrastructure like that. We don't have the ability to build something so rapidly. So when we don't really do that, then you need to, your best effort or your best bet would be to see how you can do the existing ones, pull people up, and then say, okay, this is something you got to do. You can't refuse people with COVID symptoms to get basic healthcare. I mean, it's your fundamental right, so to say. So yeah, well, so that's where we are at the moment. The hospitals are still being stressed. So today the government, the local state government, has issued some kind of a notice or a circular saying that going forward, COVID positive patients who have mild symptoms are going to be advised to just be at home. So until things get really worse, where they have breathlessness or other pneumonia kind of symptoms, where they cannot manage at home without getting into an ICU or a ventilator support, they have advised people to just stay at home and see how things go, because obviously you can't take any medicine. So yeah, so that's the advice we are seeing nowadays, which I think is an indicator of where we are in terms of our healthcare really able to kind of match up with the rising cases.
Yeah, and like you said, it's a huge difference. 14 days ago, you had in your region 2-digit number, the daily new cases, and now you're talking about 900, 1,000, and that's only one part. I was looking, India yesterday, the whole country had almost 20,000 new cases. That is an amount that is very close to what Brazil and the United States have. Brazil is around 35,000 or so a day. The United States, unfortunately, is going way off, 40, 45, Brazil, we even had a week ago or so, there were 55,000 a day. And we need to remember that these numbers are the numbers that we know, the numbers that are confirmed, that are reported. But as we have spoken over and over again since the beginning of the pandemic, the real numbers are much higher. And that is why we really have to be careful. There's no vaccine, there's no cure, there's no treatment right now. One of the things that is the topic of the year of the pandemic is the vaccine, is the treatment. And in the last few days, in the last few weeks, there has been more news, and some of these news actually come from India. So I know that the human trial of the vaccine in India has been, the commencement has been announced. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so if you looked at the vaccine race, so to say, India was one of the countries where people did hope that something is going to come out of it, because India has quite a large number of pharma manufacturers who manufacture generics that is generally exported to other developed countries, including the US. So when US was like literally stockpiling hydroxychloroquine, India was one of the major suppliers there as well. So yeah, so even in the vaccine race, there was one company which kind of stood there competing with others. So yes, in the last 2 days we have had reports of the human trial starting off with the first candidate of vaccines called Covaxin. I think that's the name. Yeah. Sorry. So yeah, so that's coming up. People are very hopeful, and well, when it says it starts human clinical trial, you do know that it's not going to rapidly progress just like that. It's just going into the human clinical trial this month in July. So they still have to finish the phase 1, which will prove that it is safe, and there are already doubts from the Oxford vaccine candidate, where there have been skeptics about the vaccine not being safe for people who are already old, because you're actually injecting the virus, and then that might, really cause disruptions in their health, and it may really take a turn for the worse. So that is still there. So first you need to just prove that it is safe, and then you need to prove that it is efficient against this particular strain of viruses. And we are again hoping against hope that the virus does not mutate and then turn into a different strain altogether that the vaccine cannot really protect against. So it's still a long way. It's still like a year or 18 months. That's kind of been the timeline that we've been hearing from authentic sources. Of course, there are sources who want to get everything before an election or before some major event, but that's realistically not possible. So yes, it's a ray of hope. And it's also a major or a big deal in India, because if we do succeed, then India is a developing country with such a huge population. Then procuring vaccines or getting the pipeline in place once the vaccine is actually found and manufactured, that is a big challenge for a country like India. First, we are not the world superpowers like the US, which already is hogging up everything that is
Exactly.
that is kind of showing some direction of working, or even if it doesn't, so to say, with HCQ. But yeah, so there is no equitable distribution of vaccines so far. We don't know how the WHO plans to do it, because there probably isn't any roadmap for it. And for a low and middle income country, where India is one of them, it's hard to push your way through when there are big players. So so if at all we do succeed, that's going to be a great news in terms of having ourselves self-sufficient, so to say, with vaccines. But if it also ends up where there are more collaborations and more transparency on how the distribution of vaccine is going to be more equitable and accessible to every other country, then that would possibly be a more welcome news, in my opinion, wherever the vaccine is produced. So that's
and like you said, it's not only about finally creating a vaccine that actually works, that is safe and that it's effective, but it's also, okay, the production of it and the distribution of it, because it needs to go to the world. As we know, a pandemic stays until it's nowhere, right? Until you don't find the virus anywhere. And that is why it needs to go everywhere. As we know, fortunately, since it's a global goal to be able to get the vaccine, we have scientists and doctors from all over the world working with the World Health Organization, because the World Health Organization, from the beginning, that's what they do. It's the global health organization that works with everybody in order to find a cure, find a vaccine. So yes, there's many human trials that are starting, that have started. There's a lot of optimism, but there's no guarantee, because who knows? Hopefully that is not the case, obviously, but the human trial that is going to start now in India may start, and after a few days, a few weeks, a few months, it doesn't work, or it's not good enough. Because obviously there are parameters, right? It's not about, yeah, it works, that's it. No, does it work for X amount of people? Are they safe? Are there no side effects? Because just like the virus here, we still don't know all the side effects. We don't know how it's gonna, the people that have recovered, what they will have in 2 months, 20 years. So imagine with a vaccine, we need to ensure that there are no side effects, or that the side effects are minimal, right? It's a very, very difficult topic. And that is why we need to do as much as possible right now without the vaccine, without a treatment.
right.
No?
So what is interesting in the last week is that there is this one proponent of Ayurveda. So Ayurveda is the traditional medical system that supposedly took roots in India. And while there have been some scientific basis for what works with Ayurveda in terms of the active components of different plant-based medicines that has come of it, but of course a lot of things are gray. Some people just push it aside as not science. And some people do say, okay, there is some basis for it, but we still have to absorb whatever is being said of Ayurveda in a more scientific rigor and a scientific procedure that we put in with other medicines, like any other allopathic medicine. So there is this one company called Patanjali, which is run by the famous yoga guru called Ramdev. And initially it made its mark in the FMCG industry, the food and beverages so the fast moving goods industries, like your toothbrush, your groceries and things like that. So they came up with this alternative, so to say, Ayurveda based products. And it did give a shock to the multinational conglomerates like Colgate, Palmolive, or the Unilever, etc. So it was hailed as a local success, so to say, but that was just in the FMCG industry. But right now, what they have done in the past 2 weeks is that he has released, or the company, the Patanjali company has released a claim to say, so to say, of medicine or a tablet. They call it the Coronil, and that's supposed to help people who have symptoms of COVID-19 kind of manage. So initially they claimed that the medicine would cure it. And then the Ministry of Ayush, which is a ministry that looks after Ayurvedic and Unani, Siddha, and other types of traditional medicine. So they came in and said, okay, you can't claim it to be cure because you haven't really proved that it does cure. So they said, okay, you can use the word manage, but not cure. So they've stuck to the word manage COVID. And they have also claimed that they have done some kind of random control trial, double-blind placebo random control trial. The paper that they're speaking about, the study, the data, everything is still shady. We haven't had access so far to it, and they haven't really provided more data as to where and how and what kind of trial was done. So among journalist circles, there's a lot of skepticism about what they're saying, the claim, and it's bordering pseudoscience at the moment. But considering there is a lot of followers of this particular system of medicine plus this particular person, it could be possible that you could see a big wave of people going and absorbing this medicine for whatever good it is. So it could be also something to worry about, considering that we don't know what the side effects of these medicines are. We don't know whether it really manages. We don't know anything about it. But still, people might just want to take a blind shot because it's easy to just take something rather not to take anything at all and then just be worried. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes. But that's news at the moment.
News in the, and yeah, obviously there's more and more hope, in the sense, more and more things that one can be hopeful about, but we still need to be careful, because some of these things unfortunately do not work or will not work, and some of these things were never meant to work. They were just there to sell hope. And we have seen it in Africa and Latin America, all over the world, right? It's also business. There's also the ugly side, right, that is shown in a pandemic. So we need to be careful, and we need to keep on doing the things that we know can help. And that is thinking about others. Wear that mask, not just for your family, but also for the neighbor that you don't even know, right? And it helps you. Spoorthy, it has been so interesting to see how much it has unfortunately changed in India in these 14 days. And just based on this experience of how we've told your story, because this is your story, it's the story of India, it's the story of Bangalore, and obviously it's a story that will continue to be told. But for this series, 14 Days to Change, we are going to stop here. But before we stop, what message do you give your fellow Indians, fellow Asians, fellow world, based on what is happening right now, what has happened? What recommendation, what inspiration, what words do you want to part with?
So I just would want to say that this pandemic, no matter where you are in the world, has shown a lot of difference between the haves and the have-nots. You might be on either side of it. You might be the haves, which is good for you, or you may be the have-nots, which has really shown that there is a stark difference between the two. So I would say the world at least has to take this opportunity as something where it can try to be kinder to people, like, just try and be kind, because you don't know where they are coming from, what they've gone through. You don't know their stories. So let's make this world a kinder place, if not anything. Yes, we will do vaccines, we will do all the testing, we will do all the measures to beat the pandemic, but that shouldn't just stop there. It should probably look at how you make world a better place in a lot of sense. And this pandemic, I think, has really given that opportunity, because it's really shown us where we are as human beings, as citizens of the world. To my fellow Indians, to my fellow Asians, I would say, yes, we are not yet Europe, where things have already passed. There is no second wave. We are still coping with the first wave.
Yeah.
So there is still a long way to go. Use your common sense. Don't do things that you're not supposed to do. Not just be selfish, but then do think of the community at large and do what is responsible of you, what is expected of you. And uh, to the fellow Indians, to the fellow Bangaloreans, I would say, please wear a mask. Please don't go out if you don't have to. Please practice all kind of physical distancing. It doesn't have to be 1 meters. Just practice how much ever you can. Stay as far as possible from people. It's okay. There are phones. There are video calls. You can always talk to them. You don't have to be socially distant. But yeah, please be physically distant. We don't know what, while the government denies that there is no community transmission, it's a joke. I mean, we all know that there have been 60% of cases where we could not really trace back to where the origins came from. So we know we are into a phase where there is no looking back. So at least now, maybe it's all in our hands to at least safeguard ourselves, because if things take a turn for the worse, if we end up getting infected or whatever, God forbid, you don't have a healthcare system to put you back into life. So you don't probably get a ventilator for all you care. So just use your common sense. Don't get to a point where there's no return. So that's all I would like to say.
Exactly. And it's a perfect message, because remember, things change. It can go from bad to good, but also good to bad. And that's why even countries that are doing well cannot let their guard down. They need to continue, because it's the way until we're all okay. Thank you for this message. It is a message that I hope many people will hear, understand, and follow. It has been a pleasure. Thank you very much. This is 14 Days to Change, and Spoorthy, it was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. And same here, loud talking to you, and hope your message gets across as well to everybody.
Thank you.